now the mother of 6 spectacular human beings, she says in her own words, a breaker of generational trauma cycles, as she is a fellow survivor of sex trafficking. And she spent almost 40 years in an abusive system. Same, girl, same. Welcome to the show, Megan Connor.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I am so thrilled to have you with me. It's so nice to connect with somebody else who just gets it.
Yeah, it's tough if you haven't been there. We survivors have to stick together.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what my show is all about, too. We went through fire, we went through hell, and I love the title of your book because of that. So tell me a little bit about your book cover, because I love it. It's gorgeous and I
Thank
feel
you.
it.
Oh, thank you. I agonized over that. It's actually a piece of art that I did during one of my therapy sessions. I was in a group therapy setting, and I did intensive outpatient therapy for about 6 months, and it was 3 hours every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So it was a lot. And the last hour of our therapy session was always a meditation session. And very often the therapist would walk us through a chakra meditation. And so she would ask us to visualize the colors in the different chakra, and then have us, sort of think about where we wanted things to improve. So the art on the front cover is basically how I saw myself at that time in therapy. And what's really interesting to me is the part of the chakra that represents your voice was very, very tiny on my person at that time. And if I had to paint it over again today, I'm sure that would probably be the biggest aura that you see on there, because it's just so different now. I feel like I am empowered to speak my truth now.
That is amazing. And what happened to make that occur? Why so much growth?
I mean, lots and lots of therapy, but definitely one of the most pivotal moments in therapy was when I just came to a realization that I really do have everything that I need within myself to heal myself, and that I don't have to be, I don't have to worry about what other people what expectations other people put on me, in other words. And so I know a lot of people would like me to just stay quiet because that would be better for them, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, so having that realization of like, I really don't need anybody's approval to speak my truth.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't want to, damage too many other people out there. I have a lot of trauma survivors that listen to the show, but tell us a little bit about what it was that you went through, because it's traumatic.
Yes, it was very traumatic. And, therapy is the only reason I can talk about it without being triggered. And so, yes, trigger warning, but without going into a whole lot of detail, I was trafficked by our babysitter who lived one street over when I was a child. And my parents both worked, and we went over there before and after school. Just to wait for the bus, or to wait for our parents to pick us up. And at some point during that babysitting time, I was groomed by the husband of the babysitter, and then he had photographic equipment in his basement, and so he took pictures and videos of me and other children and then sold them to people.
Wow. And that wasn't the end of the trauma that you went through. I mean, that would have been traumatic enough for anybody, but you had to go through other stuff as well later on, like in college.
Yeah, and also I would say one of the hardest things was that my family of origin was not really an emotionally safe place. And so when I would try to talk about trauma or anything that happened to me, I was shut down. I was told that didn't really happen, or it wasn't really that bad. So I got a lot of gaslighting from my family members, and my family system in itself just was not healthy. And so there was a lot of emotional neglect that went on there, and I had to recover from that. And then, yeah, I had another assault when I was in college, just because of what was ingrained into my brain. I really, that programming that I received at the babysitter's house made me think that I didn't have a choice, that I had to do whatever it was that somebody else either told me to do or wanted me to do. And so whenever I got into intimate situations, I just really froze and just let happen whatever was going to happen, and got totally dissociated from my body. So there was that. And then, I ended up in an emotionally and physically abusive marriage because that sort of treatment felt really familiar to me. And I was in that marriage for a really, really long time before I started therapy. And I was shocked to find out that I was in an abusive relationship because I had no idea, and it was a surprise to nobody but me when I got divorced.
Yeah. There's so much that you're saying that I absolutely identify with in such bizarre ways. And I know you don't have much of a relationship with your family now. I certainly don't either. And for a lot of the same reasons.
Yeah.
I had to deal with for a long, long time people telling me, well, they're your only family. You should try to make amends. Have you had to deal with that?
100%,
Oh my gosh.
100%. And even just setting boundaries, like not even just cutting off or going on no contact, but setting boundaries to say, I'm not going to spend this holiday with you, or I'm going to do my own thing or whatever, just was unacceptable in my family. It was like, how dare you have a life outside of this enmeshed family?
Yeah, and just the act of not wanting to believe you or not wanting to help you when you say that something happened or saying that it never happened, all of this stuff is so real for people who go through this. And I know that as survivors, we tend to kind of analyze this and look into it and figure out why this is. Do you have your own opinion on why family members don't want to step forward to help when a child reports?
Yeah, I think it varies from person to person, but I think a lot of it is because it's scary for people to admit that something this horrible could happen this close to them. And especially for example, my parents, I'm sure there's a lot of guilt and shame there too, thinking like I should have been able to prevent this, I should have known about it. And so there's no way it could have happened without me knowing about it. So they would rather deny the truth and sort of absolve themselves of their shameful feelings. And that happens, in lots of different ways for lots of different family members.
And that's kind of the way that I've always thought about it with my mother as well. But knowing this and having that kind of understanding in me gave me the ability to more easily forgive her for this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely have forgiven my family members as well. And I understand that when you haven't confronted your own trauma or your own shame, it's really, really difficult to show up for other people in the ways that they need you to. And so I just have this recognition now that they are where they are emotionally, they are where they are as far as mental health goes. And if I don't have an expectation for them to change, then I don't get disappointed.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier for me to manage the relationship knowing what I can and can't expect from that relationship.
Right. Yeah. I don't have any relationship with mine at all, but that doesn't mean that I don't love them still and that I forgive them. You
Yeah.
just have to sometimes cut out the people that aren't good for you and they're not going to help you and progress your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely one of my biggest I guess mantras or the thing that I did during therapy was to systematically remove everything from my life that felt abusive or oppressive. And that included relationships, systems, people, whatever it was. And then I very carefully chose what I was going to add back into my life, so that now I'm surrounded by people who love me and see me for who I am. And I have relationships with people that are healthy, and the ones that are not healthy are just very much on the outside and minimized.
Yeah. Was it hard to learn how to set those healthy boundaries after being made to believe all your life that you don't have the power to say no?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was really hard. I mean, even after therapy, and sometimes it's still hard because I don't like disappointing people, and the past me was very much a pleaser. And also the past me was more concerned about other people's feelings than I was about my own. And so it was really hard for me to do that. And not only that, but because of my family not showing up for me in the way that I needed them to as a child, I had huge abandonment issues. And when you set boundaries, that can feel like abandonment. And so that was really difficult for me as well.
Yeah. Did you ever receive any kind of legal justice for the things that happened?
No, unfortunately, the person who was my original abuser passed away. His wife is still living, but I did file a police report finally. This was just only a few years ago, more than 30 years after the abuse occurred. And the police did, their investigation, and basically short of her admitting that something happened, there's really not a whole lot they can do. So,
Wow. Same.
yeah. Yeah.
Have you noticed that it's so much more difficult to get traction with people wanting to really listen to you if you haven't been a headliner in the news?
That's interesting. I have had a couple of people really question whether they wanted me to be a guest on the podcast because they want to be careful about allegations of sexual abuse, and they don't want to have people on who basically haven't proven in some way that they were abused. And that to me, that was really hard the first time that happened, because I thought, here is yet another person who doesn't believe me. And that's really not true. It's not that they don't believe me. It's just that when you have a platform and an audience, you do have to be careful about the things that you say, as far as allegations go. And so one of the hosts actually asked me for, like, do you have a journal entry or something like that sort of talks about the abuse when it happened or whatever. And so that was a little bit tough for me. Yeah,
Were you a journaler?
definitely. That's where my whole book came from, is some of the journaling that I started doing during therapy.
Yeah. And how helpful was writing once you started getting into it?
Very, very helpful. It really helps me to pull my thoughts away from the emotional reactions that I'm having. To have to express something in a concise way it's sort of like explaining it to somebody else so they can understand it when I journal. And so that really helped me untangle some of these complicated feelings and thoughts that I was having. And the other thing that has helped me a lot is doing a video diary. And so I will just say things out loud, because saying things out loud is one of the things that helps me really heal, because I felt silenced for so long.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes you hit rock bottom before you're really willing to even sound like a mouse and find a little bit of a voice.
Yeah, that's so true.
I love that you got into your artwork and that you painted your book cover. I'm going to do something I typically never do. I'm going to turn off my studio background here. This is one of my paintings.
Oh, nice.
And if anybody is only listening and they can't see it, I will put a link to it in the show notes so that you guys can see her book and my painting that I just showed off in my background. This has been a huge key in my own recovery. And even now, when I'm having any kind of a PTSD flashback or anything, I turn to art, I turn to creativity, writing, painting, drawing, or cooking.
Mm.
Is this still something that you turn to as well? Do you still incorporate a lot of art for your stuff?
Yeah, I'd have to say now it's more of a form of self-care than it is, sort of therapeutic for me. It's just really like I have all kinds of different art mediums that I like to play with, and I don't consider any of it to be, fine art or anything like that, but it's for me, so it doesn't really matter, and I've learned a few things about how to make things look better or whatever, but it's not ever anything that I'm, planning on selling or using or anything like that. It's just for me to do it.
That's exactly what it's supposed to be. If people are wanting to offer you large sums of money to hang your art in their home, then so be it.
Yeah.
But art is beautifully a form of self-expression, like writing your own story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's incredible. I love what it is that you're doing now. So tell me a little bit. I mean, I've been watching you on Instagram and kind of interacting, but tell us a little bit about what you're doing now.
Now I really am just trying to do everything that I can to help other trauma survivors. I have a coaching practice that I help people with, and that's really fulfilling for me to be able to use my pain to help save other people from pain potentially. I also am very outspoken on social media, especially Instagram, a little bit of TikTok. I'm trying to get YouTube going. But I'm very outspoken about current events and current abusive situations, and calling out powerful people who are harmful. And so I'm really trying to just help the general population understand what it's like to be a trauma survivor in this current climate, politically and socially, where a lot of people just don't realize how harmful some of the things are that are being said out there in public. So I try to post some things about learning to recognize signs of grooming and saving your kids from abusive situations, and healthy parenting and all that kind of stuff. So,
and I love it. I love it. Your website, of course, is third-verse.com, and people can find your social media links there, because I already stalked your website also. I had to know everything about you as soon as you reached out to me. It's like, yes.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course, it's like meeting a counterpart.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you get it.
Yeah.
So when you're working with other people that are trauma survivors, what's one of the like biggest key tools that you can give them?
We talk a lot about self-care. And in fact, I just published another, like, it's not quite a book. It's like a little mini pamphlet. It's called 100 Ways to Practice Self-Care. And it's really sort of a way for people to jog their brain about what are good ways to take care of yourself. And it gives them space to like write their own ideas about what works. But that's one of the major things, because whether you're doing, intensive therapy or trauma healing or even just coaching, it's going to bring up a lot of emotions and feelings, of course, and you want a way to sort of wind down from that. And so we all need ways that we can take care of ourselves and keep ourselves in a peaceful mental state.
That's beautiful. I'm just in complete awe. I'm so glad that I get a chance to just hang out with you and chat
Oh,
with you
thank
today.
you.
How do you celebrate your wins in life when something goes exceptionally well?
I am not afraid to treat myself. I love to do nice things for myself. I will take myself out for a nice dinner. I will celebrate with a glass of champagne every once in a while. I love, just like you, I love to cook things, and I will just go out and get the bougiest, fanciest ingredients and make myself a treat of some kind. Just the other day, I made myself this beautiful fig tart that had goat cheese and balsamic drizzle on it. I mean, just stuff like that. I really love to, do something special for myself.
I haven't eaten in about 5 hours, and that just made me hungry. Yeah, and on that subject, I made bacon and Gruyere grilled cheese sandwiches the other day, and my husband is
Oh,
now completely addicted to Gruyere cheese.
yeah, that's one of my favorite combinations. I love that.
Oh, that's mm. So you have a book.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about the book. What's the title? Where can people find it?
It's called I Walked Through Fire to Get Here. You can find it on my website at third-verse.com, but you can also find it on Amazon. And it is the story of how I survived and thrived after sex trafficking. It talks a lot about the different things that affected my therapy journey, and it's really just supposed to be a beacon of hope for survivors. Because for me personally, the hardest part was looking at my circumstances and my trauma and thinking, I don't know anybody else who's gone through what I've gone through and who has survived it. And when you look at the statistics for survivors, they're very grim. Lots of addiction, lots of suicidality, lots of failed relationships and failed careers and financial problems. And so I just want people who are working through that dark place to know that it's possible to come out the other side and have a peaceful and happy life.
Yeah, you don't have to just survive. You can also thrive.
Yes, exactly.
That's exactly what you're doing. And where did you get the name for your website, Third Verse?
I'm a musician and have been almost my entire life. And I just look at my childhood as the first verse of my song and my marriage as the second verse. And this right here is my third verse. And I finally feel like I'm the one who's writing it.
Oh, fantastic. And speaking of writing, I understand you have a little bit of your writing that you'd like to share with us.
Yes, I do. I have a little teaser chapter of my book. It's not super long, but here goes. You know me. I am a survivor. I've always had a stunningly good memory. We used to play a family game where someone would name a restaurant that we'd eaten at months before, and I would recall with uncanny detail what everyone had eaten. I remember almost every detail about the 4 years that our family lived in South Dakota, even though I was only 7 years old when we arrived there. I can recall the names of all of my friends and teachers. I remember the phone number and address at our house. I remember the makes, models, and license plates of our cars. Why then were there gaps in my memory that only come up when I think of one room in one house on the corner of one street over from ours? I had just celebrated my 7th birthday when my family moved from sunny Louisiana to that frozen tundra. My baby sister was 1, and Halloween came and went as we stayed in a little one-story Holiday Inn on the outskirts of town. The early November sky issued its tiny flakes of first snow on the day we ventured to the shopping mall to buy things we had never seen. Moon boots, snow pants with suspenders, puffy coats, and mittens inside which our fingers couldn't move. We lived in a little yellow house on a quiet street where we and the neighborhood kids played kickball and football and kicked the can. When we wanted wider, more open spaces, we headed to the end of the street where there was an open park and the beginnings of a baseball diamond that had been trampled into the scraggly grass. Even when it turned colder and the accumulated snow made the first venture down the tornado side slippery and wet, there were almost always kids at the park from after school until the streetlights came on. I don't remember when my mom started her new job, but she left for work even earlier than we left for school. So she sent us one street over to a neighbor babysitter, and we waited for the bus there. I didn't mind much because they had something I knew I would never see at my house, HBO. Of course, there wasn't anything very exciting programmed at that hour of the morning. Usually it was either Fraggle Rock or The Never-Ending Story, both of which were better than the Farm Report and commercials about swine rhinitis, which was all we got at my house at that hour. I remember the babysitter's name was Lynn because I read it over and over on her coffee cup, which was almost always in her hand. She had a severe underbite and prominent lower teeth. She had short, dark hair that stood up in the back. She had a heavy-set frame and wore a scowl almost all the time. She would occasionally talk in a sing-song voice, but the mirth of that sound never touched her eyes. They had a daughter a bit younger than me, whose name I also remember because I watched her arduously spell it out in crayon several times. I watched how she held the crayon, and I marveled at her cutting cleanly through thick sheets of paper with a special pair of scissors which had been modified to accommodate the malformed thumb on her right hand. There was another daughter, much older than me, but I don't remember how old. It was hard to tell because she was severely disabled, and we didn't see her much. Only when her mother would transfer her from her special wheelchair to a beanbag on the floor in front of the TV. I remember the dad's name was Jim. I remember the walking cast on his right leg and the rosacea all over his face. He either had an underbite too, or he squared his jaw every time he looked at me or one of the other kids and didn't like what we were doing, which was always no matter what we were doing. He had a large belly and he often wore suspenders to hold up his pants. I remember sitting alone on a beanbag in front of the TV, but where were the other children? I remember standing outside the basement door, and that's where my mind went blank. How is it that I could remember so many details about my life in that place and remember nothing that happened behind the basement door? I dreamed about the door all the time. In my dream, I knew what was behind the door, but when I woke, I could never remember what it was, and in my dream, I could never open it.
Wow. So your descriptions were incredible. And I got to say, the food memory, me too. The remembering phone numbers from childhood, 988-1976, me too.
Yeah. Yeah. 333-6248.
Oh my gosh. Isn't it bizarre?
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy.
But hearing you describe Lynn humming and how that never matched the expression on her face, oh, that's spooky in itself.
Yeah, as a kid to observe that, and as a kid, I didn't know what that meant, but looking back on it as an adult now, it's like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yep. There was something inside that woman that was dying or already dead.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with me today. We only have a couple minutes left. I know I could spend probably 4 or 5 hours just talking to you, but I won't do that to either of us. So it is that time for me to ask my last question. It's my absolute favorite question. What is one thing that you love about yourself that's not related to your physical appearance?
I love my ability to connect with people. And I think a lot of that comes from, you could say it came from a traumatic place, because my hypervigilance as a child forced me to notice things about people and to notice what touched them emotionally in different ways. And so even though it developed as a traumatic coping mechanism, it's something that has really turned into a beautiful thing in my life. And it gave me the ability to be a teacher. I was a teacher for almost 15 years, and it gave me an uncanny ability to be able to instantly connect with my students and to know what they needed. And I feel the same way about, everything that I do in my life is about relationships with other people. And I think it is the most important thing. And I think our relationships with ourselves is the most important relationship that we can develop. And so that empathy that started out as a coping mechanism is something that has turned into something beautiful in my life. I love it.
If you've enjoyed tonight's episode, please make sure you check out the episode description. You'll find links there on how you can learn more about this guest, links to connect with them on social media, and how to support the podcast. Remember, I don't get paid to do this. My boss is a bit tight-fisted, but I can say that. I work for myself.